Creating killer content. What are the top 5 camera features that creators for Reels or YouTube videos can't live without? Welcome to my channel. This is Magnus speaking. I like to talk cameras specifically for video. And in this video, we're going to talk about the features that are vital to us creators when it comes to making videos for you guys to watch, whether that's Instagram or whether that's here. Now let's go over the list. Now this list is specifically for camera features itself, and there's a lot of other different factors that come into play, such as audio, such as lighting, such as setting the scene, and especially storytelling and the ability to captivate and entertain your audience. But if we're talking about camera features that make our lives easier, this video is for you. 5 features. Here we go. Number 1. Now this should be obvious, but it's high quality video. Now what I mean by that is the camera's ability to record at least 1080p. Now come on, if you're not recording 1080p, what are you doing? Up to 1080p, 4K, and even above if you so suggest going that high. But this video right now is being recorded in 1080p, and it's good enough for most content creators. And you can of course go higher, and I love to record 8K video, to be perfectly honest, but it's not necessary all the time. However, high quality video, good frame rate selection, so at least up to 60 frames per second on your camera, which will allow you to get that slow motion in case you want to do that, or to get smooth, buttery smooth video if you actually want to output in 60 frames per second. But these type of settings and quality are very important when it comes to video creation. And that's something that I would say is a standard. Luckily nowadays, even some of the most basic smartphones have the ability to record at least 60 frames per second in 1080p. So problem solved for many content creators. Moving on. Now this one's crucial too for a lot of creators. Not everyone has the ability to record in the dark. And quite honestly, you don't want to record in the dark. You want to set up lighting like I mentioned before. But there's not always a situation, especially if you're vlogging or walking and talking or creating a video in a very specific place, you want good low light performance. Now cameras, the larger the sensor, usually the better the low light performance you're going to get. But that isn't always the case. I've recorded great looking low light footage on my Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera 4K. And the sensor in that is a 4/3 size sensor, which is like half the size of a regular sensor. So sometimes sensor size plays a part, but not always. The more important thing is, of course, the low light performance, the light that it does gather, and how it processes that footage with as minimal noise as possible so that it looks crisp and clear. And when you have cell phones, sometimes they have this processing that they do internally to make low light look great. But honestly, if you want true good looking footage that's low light, you're probably going to want to get a DSLR or mirrorless camera that provides a larger sensor. The third thing, and this I was saying right from the get-go, good autofocus. Now, autofocus is something that if it works, you never notice it. A lot of phones themselves do have autofocus, but since the sensor sizes are so small, almost everything is in focus, so you don't really worry about that too much. But the larger the sensor, the more you have the ability to blur out the background, which a lot of people like. Now, when you're blurring out the background, such as I have here, it can be a problem if your autofocus doesn't work right. Now, cameras historically, for example, the Panasonic GH series and Panasonic series in general had a contrast detect autofocus, which was difficult to use, and because of that, and I own a GH5 like right back there, and it had that contrast detect autofocus, which wasn't great. Unfortunately, that's caused me to barely use that camera. I'm using the 5D Mark IV right now. I own other cameras from Canon. I don't own any Sonys, but I know Sonys are terrific too with autofocus, and because of that, this older camera is still in use because autofocus is great. And no matter how good your video looks, if nothing's in focus, it doesn't matter. Moving on. Now this one, not a lot of people think about too, but when it comes to audio, audio is like half of your video. If the audience doesn't like how you sound and you sound really amateur, they're going to turn away. So unless you're putting music over all of your videos and not really doing any speaking in itself, it's important to have a microphone jack in your cameras. DSLR and mirrorless cameras, and even phones themselves, do not have the best type of microphones that can pick up good quality audio. So a good idea is to have a microphone jack in the camera so that when you actually are recording, you could connect a third-party microphone onto the camera, either on the hot shoe on the top, or you can rig it up and like put it on the side if you want, but really get it pointed towards you so that mostly you are in focus. Or you can even connect a lavalier and use a lavalier so that you can actually record better audio, because audio means everything when it comes to telling a story on YouTube or a quick Instagram reel or TikTok video, because those are important. And yes, you can use external audio systems as well if your camera doesn't have a mic port, but then that's extra work in post. And why do that when you just want to have everything in one file? And that's why having a mic jack is important. And finally, this is not the case for all, especially if you're talking like this, but it is the case for a lot, especially when you're running and gunning or going out there. And that's image stabilization. Whether you're using image stabilization in your lens or your camera has it in itself, image stabilization will make or break your footage, especially if you're out and about and you just don't want to make everyone sick with constant camera shake. Image stabilization makes it so much easier to be where you want to be and not look amateurish or distracting with the amount of shake that you might have. Is it absolutely necessary at all times? No. In fact, a lot of filmmakers would never use a camera with image stabilization because they want full control of the camera movements, whether they want a lot of shake or minimal shake. And if we want minimal shake, we had devices such as a gimbal, such as a Steadicam, or even just putting it on a tripod. Like I've got my camera on a tripod right now. It's got no image stabilization, neither does the lens, but it's perfectly steady, and that's all I need, and I have control over that. However, image stabilization, especially when you're just recording something really quick, it's always a plus to have it when you're buying a new camera. And then when you don't want to use it, you could turn it off and still get a good shot, especially with like shakes if you purposely want to do shakes, though it's not as flawless as what you would get if it didn't have any image stabilization from the sensor. But on that note, even cameras that don't have sensor stabilization, you can still buy lenses that'll have optical image stabilization, which will do a pretty good performance, especially when you need it. However, if you do want to stabilize, like I said, there are options out there, but isn't it just easier to already have it built into your camera? Now, word of warning, some manufacturers, such as Canon, introduce some sort of a weird wobble, especially when you're filming anything from a wide angle point of view. But when it comes to image stabilization, sometimes you'd rather have the option than not have it at all. And that's why image stabilization is crucial and important. But those are my 5. What are your 5, or what are your other features that I didn't mention that would be important to you? Let me know in the comments down below. And as always, you can like, share, and make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. See you guys next time.